Okay, if we get into a situation as we look out, we're a week away out from an expected hurricane going to hit the Gulf Coast region. So now what do we do? What are actions do we need to put in place? How do we implement our hurricane preparedness that we've been working on maybe earlier in the year before we actually see this hurricane? The first thing to think about is evacuating livestock and how to deal with those. If you are going to evacuate livestock, have a plan for it. Most of the time, producers, when we're thinking about livestock in large numbers, it's just not logistically possible to evacuate those animals. When we're thinking about large number of cattle or sheep, goats, etc., it's usually just not practical or feasible to get those cattle up, worked, and then put them in the trailers and then move them considerable ways inland. And so things that we can do, if we cannot do that, a lot of times individuals will maybe want to put them into barns. But typically barns don't hold up to hurricane force winds or tornadoes. So the barn collapses. When the barn collapses, then the animals don't necessarily die from the wind or the rain or the elements. They die from trauma because of flying objects, etc. So unless you really have a hurricane-proof structure, it's maybe not best to put them in a barn or something like that. Turn those cattle out, or horses or whatever, out into larger pens, larger lots, and places where those cattle can go or livestock can go, and they can seek shelter on their own. Put them in large pastures where there's maybe some brush, heavy dense brush or trees. Animals will naturally seek out some kind of shelter, and most of the time if they do that, they're going to be okay, as long as you don't have any other flying object or debris. The other thing that we really have to think about too is one of the major issues is flooding. Whenever we get a hurricane come in, we typically see some heavy rainfalls, and so it's good if you can move those cattle out of those low-lying areas and those river bottoms or creek bottoms. Get them out of there if possible into some higher ground. If you cannot physically get those cattle out, open up all the gates, and hopefully they can find their way out of those situations as well. But those are some things that we can do to those animals if we're going to if we cannot physically move them or evacuate them. Now, if we choose to evacuate them, first you've got to figure out, well, where am I going to go with those animals? And so that plan needs to be in place. You need to figure that out. And the other thing is, too, we've learned from experiences such as Rita here in Texas during that major evacuation out of that Gulf Coast region. Traffic can be deadlocked. And so if you're going to evacuate livestock, you need to do it no later than 72 hours out, preferably even more than that, just before we get into the traffic jams from the general population moving out. If you do move them out, evaluate your trailers. Make sure that the floors are safe, they're sound. Make sure your tires and all your equipment's working properly. And then the big thing is to make sure that you don't overcrowd those trailers when you put them on the road, because it's better to leave some of them behind rather than taking a chance of cramming them into a trailer and possibly having some go down or get hurt, etc. But those are just some things to think about from an evacuation standpoint. One other thing that we can do in preparation, let's say, for example, we are going to leave livestock there, or even if we evacuate those livestock, think about trying to pick up all the loose tin and other junk that's laying around that potentially could blow, because it could blow into livestock, or more importantly, it could blow into your house or vehicles or something like that. So try to clean up around the ranch a little bit to pick up any of those junk or those materials, and that should be done well in advance of the hurricane season. And then also think about strapping down other feeders and trailers and different things so that if we do get some high winds, that they don't become airborne as well. And then the last thing to think about too, as we think about immediately we've got a hurricane coming in, we need to make sure that we've got some feed and water supplies on hand for a couple of weeks period. Because if it is a truly devastating storm, it's going to be tough to be getting in feed resources. So have some feed, hay, resources on hand so that those cattle can be fed. Hay is important because basically cattle can be self-fed that hay, and they can sustain on their own for a period of time, and it's pretty easy. You don't have to have troughs, etc. The other thing to be thinking about is water source, and making sure that you've got some water source available. If you're prone to possibly some incoming ocean water coming into your property, the ponds and things that you normally have may not be an option because they could be contaminated with salt water. So those are some things to be thinking about. Be prepared for the worst, because we have seen, as we look into that Louisiana, Mississippi, etc., and even Florida over the years, we learned from a lot of mistakes and some challenges they have. And worst case scenarios are often the things we need to be planning for, because if it can happen, it will happen.